Is free birth safe? Is it a legitimate choice?
A decision to free birth is a decision to step out of mainstream maternity care and take full responsibility over that.
This series sets out to examine free birth and birth culture more broadly, at a moment when public discourse online and in the media has largely settled on a single narrative: that natural birth outside the medical system is unsafe, unsavoury, and difficult to justify. Some of that scrutiny is warranted, some of it may not withstand closer examination.
Childbirth is rarely a medical event.
This series is an attempt to determine which is which.
And these are the people that are sitting in judgment of the free birthers and the home birthers, and their house is such a mess.
Over the course of this investigation, you will hear from medical professionals, researchers, and women who have chosen to free birth.
I think that free birth is something that is here to stay. You're not going to talk women out of it. It's only going to grow.
In an effort to establish what the evidence actually shows about risk in birth. Why are women gravitating towards this option?
I think there's an element of ignorance there.
And where are there gaps in the information in regards to this way of birthing?
I think it's important that we regain those skills that have been co-opted and medicalized.
This series does not promise definitive conclusions. I am trusting you, the listener, to engage with the material with nuance and a critical eye, and to weigh the evidence for yourself. This is the Birth Series from Return to Wisdom, and I'm your host, Keshia.
Are we going to get cancelled?
Yes, probably.
We're going to get cancelled for this conversation.
I am ridiculously picky about what goes on my skin, and I have zero time for complicated routines. For years, I was reading ingredient labels, Googling things I couldn't pronounce, and still not trusting what I was buying. And then I found In Bloom, and honestly, these guys are legends. Pure plant-based skincare made in Byron Bay. No toxins, no fillers, no fuss. The kind of brand that actually cares about what they're putting in the bottle and on your body. If you're as picky as I am and don't have time to mess around, this is it. In Bloom are offering Return to Wisdom listeners a discount. Use my code Return to Wisdom Podcast at inbloom.com. That's INBLUEM.com. Link will be in the show notes. One of the most profound things I've ever done for myself, my body, and my marriage was Kim Anami's work. Kim is a holistic sex and relationship coach, and what she teaches goes far deeper than you might expect. Her courses are about coming home to your body, deeply reconnecting with your partner, and understanding that when that part of your life is truly alive and thriving, everything else rises with it. Your confidence, your energy, your presence. I experienced that firsthand and I watched it transform my world. I have done her work and I can honestly say every single one of her courses is worth your time. You'll find the link in the show notes, and by using it, you're also supporting the podcast. This is the kind of investment that pays for itself 1,000 times over.
That's all right, we'll do it again.
Welcome, everyone, to Return to Wisdom. I am so excited to introduce Melanie Jackson, also known as Melanie the Midwife. If you haven't listened previously to The Road to Wisdom, where we had Melanie on, she is awesome. I highly recommend you listening to that podcast. I can't sing your praises more, Melanie. I really enjoy everything you share. And I said this previously, but I'll say it again for anyone new. You just give a very grounded and knowledgeable approach. And I feel like every one of your opinions is very heavily influenced and motivated by research and long-term experience. So I always very much appreciate everything you have to share. And you also have the Great Birth Rebellion, which I will plug that now because even though I plan on no more babies, I still love listening to it, and I love listening to, it's a real gem in amongst the noise for anyone who wants any information regarding pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you. What an intro. Oh my gosh.
Just singing your praises. I'm just warming you up for the very hectic conversation we're about to have.
Just lay it on. I'm happy. I'll accept it.
Yeah. Oxytocin vibes. And now let's get hardcore. For anyone who is new here and new to your work, do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself apart from everything I just shared?
Absolutely. So, yes, Melanie Jackson is my name. My kind of stage name in the midwifery world is Melanie the Midwife. And I've been a home birth midwife for 18 years. I've never worked in a hospital as a clinician. So, as a student midwife, I did my student years and went straight out into home birth, which is a really unique thing for an Australian midwife. So, my experience is in birth physiology and being able, my superpower, and as every midwife superpower should be, but I've had to hone it over time, intently, because I'm the clinician at a birth without anybody else there. Often there's a second midwife who comes at some point, but it's, yeah, so I've been able to hone what normal birth looks like and what it looks like when it's not going okay. And then I know when it's time to transfer. And so all of my skills in physiological birth, I have 2 babies of my own, 13 and 9. They were both born at home in 2 very different births. And yes, I'm the host of the Great Birth Rebellion podcast and a slew of other things. If you go to melaniethemidwife.com, you'll see all the stuff I'm doing, but that's a nutshell of where I'm at.
Yeah. Oh, no. And also you're a homeschooler, which I think that's definitely, that's like needs to be listed because that's a feat in and of itself. So
Homeschooling. Oh, and I forgot to mention too, people call me Dr. Melanie Jackson, or I am Dr. Melanie Jackson because I also have a PhD on the topic of birth outside the system, which I think is where we're going with this episode as well at some point.
it is.
Yes, for homeschooling. We homestead as well. We got goats and chickens and veggies, and it's all very crunchy.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I feel like many people listening can relate to that. So we have one of us among us. So on the topic of birthing outside the system, since we're there, and we did actually previously discuss this prior to this recording, so we're going to rehash again. We were talking about, I think, everything that's come to light within Free Birth Society and the reports that came out towards the end of last year. The Guardian report and their podcast that they released. And I think we can probably also collate Charlotte King's work in that. I think there is more reporting happening. I think at the moment there's more investigations going on, journalistic investigations are the ones I'm talking about. But yes, I think a lot of this information that came out, and I know I have listeners who feel the same way, was that it was very confusing and a lot of the information coming to light was challenging to listen to, one, because, some of these stories are just heart-wrenching, but 2, because you so often only hear about the positives when it comes to birthing outside the system and free birth. So I guess where I want to go with that are what your thoughts were on that expose, for lack of a better term, on Free Birth Society and free birth.
Yeah. Oh, well, full disclosure, I couldn't listen to the podcast, just my heart. I couldn't emotionally invest in that, mostly because, I did read as much as I could in the media. And for anybody who's been following the Great Birth Rebellion podcast, I've interviewed Charlotte King, the ABC reporter, a number of times about her articles and actually some of the women who were the subjects of those articles and whose babies had poor outcomes or had passed away as a result of free birth. So I have lots of thoughts, having been in the free birth kind of realm since I finished my PhD in 2014, but I started that in 2010. So it's kind of a 16-year journey for me in understanding the choices women make around birth. And while I would never choose free birth myself, I understand, because of the research that I did and the women I've spoken to for that, and just over time, as I've collated information from the community, I understand why women choose free birth. So that I want to start there, is that I'm not here to say, oh, free birth is dangerous and free birth is stupid and how, this is ridiculous. I understand how women get to this point. However, the scene has changed in the 16 years, and I think that's what's coming out now in these newspaper articles, is free birth used to be a choice that women came to on their own. When I interviewed all of the women that I did for my PhD, it was very clear that through a series of eliminating other birth options that were available to them, they came to free birth through a journey. It wasn't presented to them as an option. They discovered it. And I think that's very different to being delivered the opportunity to be confronted with the opportunity to free birth, to be offered an opportunity to choose it off the menu of maternity care options if you hadn't had come to it on your own. And I think that's part of the problem now, is that social media and just the noise that is around free birth, and people have started to commodify it, to make money off attending free births, to make courses about free birth. There's this whole business around free birth now, which did not exist 16 years ago. There was not a business around free birth. It was a bootstrapping kind of exercise in birth options. So I think there's problems that have been created by that. And the Free Birth Society articles that came out were in no way surprising to me, mostly because I watched them come into the free birth scene. Over time, I've tried to not interact, but, I'm observant of what's happening, and I'm hearing in the community what's happening. And a long time ago, they blocked me from any of their social media, and I don't have inner access at all to the Free Birth Society. But for a long time, I've been, as people ask me about Free Birth Society, my consistent line is that there's some definite cult vibe activity that is quite obvious in that organization that was quite terrifying right from the beginning. So the fact that now the journalists are catching up and women are speaking out, which has become more possible because of how interconnected we are in online communities, women have more opportunity to speak, then it's all that I think the truth is being revealed in what's happening in the background. The truth that a lot of people didn't really want to believe, because sometimes, and I'm not saying this is all free birth communities, but there is a cultish element where everyone bands together and toes the line, and there's a unified message. And so to speak outside of that it can feel very daunting for women. It can feel like they're leaving a community that they were a part of by speaking something different into that dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the take-home message is that I wasn't surprised. When I read those, I was like, yep, I mean, this is what I've been watching and noticing myself. And the fact that it's in the articles is like, now there's an opportunity for everybody else to see that in a snapshot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A few things came up for me as you were speaking then, because like I think I reflect on my own, just my own views and perception of what was happening within free birth. Originally, like I knew nothing about Free Birth Society or free birth before I actually had a free birth. I told everyone that I just accidentally had a home birth, and that I don't know. Free birth wasn't the terminology. It was BBA, born before arrival. So that was that. When I heard about Free Birth Society, which was like, I think it's either just before or just after my third baby. I was like, oh, like this is really exciting. There's like a term for the thing that I did.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was kind of cool to be like, oh, cool. Like someone's affirming my choices and this is awesome. And there are other women doing it. And, you know, you hear stories about women birthing in a yurt by themselves with a dog and you're like, oh, this is some really cool stuff, like in a stream in the middle of some, you know, there's some really amazing, incredible stories and these babies are fine. And I think that's like, they're beautiful stories. I think they're also very important, to temper with all the other stories you should be listening to. And so, yeah, I guess for me, it was like, oh, I'm getting all this positive information here. But then there's some people who refuse to share these stories. Let's share them on our podcast because
And stories.
yeah, and then as soon as you start sharing them, then you start hearing about outcomes where it was not great. And most of the time, with the stories that we were approached with, it was the baby had passed in their free birth, and there weren't many of them. There was a handful, and these are stories that had happened over the last 20 years or something. But then, you know, I think some of these articles that came out were not reporting on stillbirths as such, but even just women who were not okay after their free births. Like everyone came out okay, but they felt that they weren't listened to, or they were being placated, or their fears were being like kind of pushed aside, or their concerns, and so they've come out of it, and like that was an awful experience, even though the outcomes were what everyone feels like should be phenomenal. So I think that's information that now I've received and been like, okay, I need to reflect on this and reflect on my perception and of what I thought was happening versus what is actually going on. And now I'm like, Melanie, come on, because I need to sort through this.
Yeah. Yes. And the other thing is that there's two things going on here. And they're two things that people have struggled to separate from each other, because free birth is one thing,
Mm,
and I have less of a problem with free birth than I have around the other thing, which is unregulated birth workers who are
mm,
overstepping their boundaries. And where we see a lot of these problems where women are dissatisfied or feeling like they were, um, if they have some regrets about their birth choices, it often involves the unregulated birth worker who's
mm,
put themselves in a position that they shouldn't have put themselves in and offered things to women that they couldn't do. So the thing with when you choose free birth, you're taking on the role of what a maternity care provider would have done for you. And part of the role of a maternity care provider is to responsibly wave red flags if they see maybe a potential issue and draw your attention to that and say, hey, our professional opinion, our professional expertise says what's happening to you right now is an abnormal thing. So we need to do something. You need to choose something. There's got to be a solution sought to this problem. If they're a good healthcare provider, they'll say, here's what's on offer to solve this problem. What feels best for you?
yeah.
What would you like to do about this problem? If you're choosing a free birth, you need to take on the role of that red flag waiver. It's your responsibility. You can't just not include a care provider and then just hope for the best, but you have to take on the responsibility and the role that the care provider would have had in your birth if you've got a chance to identify when things are not going well and to identify when it's time to abandon the plan of free birth and seek out some medical care. And so, for women who are choosing free birth of their own free will without feeling coerced or inspired by the community around them, what what I've witnessed and what came out in my PhD research is those women get prepared. They take this really seriously. They take on the responsibility, understanding that they are the ones who make decisions about if things are normal or not normal and when to seek help or not. And the issue is coming when you start to add unregulated birth workers who claim to have the ability to wave the red flag of this is a problem, this is a problem. Women believe that they don't have to get prepared in the same way as they used to because they've hired this birth worker who has supposed to the woman that, yes, I'm capable of letting you know when things aren't normal. I'm capable of letting you know when it's time to transfer. In fact, I'm capable of offering some of the solutions to the problems that might arise in your birth. That's
Mm.
the problem. The problem is not free birth. The problem is that unregulated birth workers have put themselves in the position that the free birthing woman should have been in.
Do you think that there's also a chance that the birth worker hasn't put themselves in that position, but the woman hiring her has made these assumptions because, I'm
Yes.
paying as much for this birth worker as a midwife, and so that should just equate the same level of responsiveness when the time
Exactly.
is needed.
And I also think that it's possible that unregulated birth workers are maybe not saying to the woman that they can do all these things, but they're still putting themselves in a position
Mm,
of authority in the woman's birth space,
yeah.
and the woman is deferring some responsibility to that birth worker because they've paid. Exactly, because it's a business transaction. Okay, well, if you're not going to be the red flag waiver, if you're not going to tell me and help me make decisions, what are you even here for? Why am I paying you $3,000 or $4,000? What are you going to do for me? And so there is an assumption that, okay, I've paid you all this money. You firstly must have some other skill other than a doula, like in addition to your work as a doula. And I want to put doulas and unregulated birth workers in two different camps as well, by the way. I think there are doulas who work completely within their scope and who don't offer clinical care, and I'm 100% all for that. Do not hear me being, some people said, "You're anti-doula." No, absolutely not. I am so pro doula. I'm anti doulas who cross the line into clinical work and assume that they have some skill that they do not have. Regardless of your experience, if you're not a midwife, you can't practice midwifery. And in fact, you think you can sometimes, but that midwifery is as much as of an art and an experiential skill than it is theory. In fact, the theory is almost useless in midwifery without the practice. So, um, so your question about do you think that women assume more of the birth worker than the birth worker had offered? I do think that's also a problem, but I think it's the responsibility of the birth worker to really clear that up with the woman. If the birth worker thinks, oh, she's giving me some authority in her decision making. She's asking questions about, is this normal? If you're asking your doula or birth worker, is this normal? You're asking them to make a clinical decision. That's something you're supposed to take that responsibility. And the birth worker in that scenario should, if they're working within their scope, say, I'm not here to help you with clinical decisions. I can't answer this question for you. If you're concerned, you need to make a decision about going to hospital. And there's this line that gets crossed, and then because it gets crossed, it's this gray area, and it's this shifting of responsibility or diluting of responsibility over the decision making that I think has become the problem in the free birth community.
Yeah. I have to say that I do know of women who refer to themselves as birth workers who are very strong with those boundaries as well. And they very much work within their scope, and they're like, I'm here to emotionally support you and hold your hand as you walk through the fire. Like that like really grunty part of labor, that's what I do. But in terms of like, is this normal? Should I be doing this? Whatever, that's all on you, So like I do know birth workers who are very strong on that too. And I think that like my personal opinion is that's like the perfect way to do it, and that's how all birth workers should be speaking to their clients. But yeah, no, I just after these articles, and I'm still like, I'm very cynical. So when I read these articles, I still like, and when I listened to the Guardian podcast, I mean, there were some things that I felt were taken out of context because I had listened to the full podcast that it had come from, or what So there's a little bit of back and forth there, but I do feel like the one thing that does strike me as needing clarification is what role a doula or birth worker does play within the birth scenario. And if you are there, like, I actually want someone, I want to have a free birth, but I really want someone there who can, raise red flags for me, or who knows birth better than I do because this is my first or second or third birth and I don't know birth. Like, I think that you don't want a free birth. I think
You
that's
want a midwife.
yeah.
And I get messages all the time from women saying, "Oh, I don't want to go to hospital, but I don't know if when I should go if I'm having a free birth, if no one's there." Like, you shouldn't be having a free birth. If you don't know the answer to that question, you want a midwife
Mm, mm,
to, and I've even had women try and hire me. I'm a midwife, and they go, "Well, I don't want you to do anything unless there's something wrong."
yeah.
Like, okay, well, you don't want a free birth. You want a home birth because that's what home birth midwives do,
Yeah.
theoretically. You
Theoretically.
don't do anything unless there's something wrong. There's nothing to be done.
Mm,
So I think this is the gray area where the problems are arising in. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So on that,
Are we gonna get cancelled?
yes, probably. Just
For this conversation?
well, and here's the thing. Like, I am very aware that a lot of my audience are free birthers, want a free birth, really love free birth stories. So I'm not here, and I free birthed. Like, I'm not here to diss that as a choice for women at all. But I feel like there is so much, I hate the term misinformation, but I got to use it here. There's a lot of information out there. And I think it's a really important conversation to have amongst, like, I don't know. I think one of the things that I've heard so many times and seen online was like, you can't say this because you're not a free birther, and you can't say that
Oh my
because you're not a
gosh.
free birther. So like,
Ah,
hi,
I
I'm a
know.
free birther.
And this
I want,
argument
oh,
of you can't say anything because you're not a free birther.
yeah,
That is the most infuriating thing that people, I mean, they say it to me all the time.
yeah,
Women
I've seen
contact
it.
me, how dare you? Yeah, how dare you talk about free birth if you've never free birthed?
Mm.
Okay, so here's what I say to that. When I did my PhD, I did not just make up things and like read things and then write about free birth. The only data that I collected about free birth was directly from women who free birthed. So the avenue of a researcher who's written a PhD is not me writing a story about free birth based on my opinions.
Mm.
A researcher, an unbiased, good researcher, and I got very good marks for my PhD, I'll just say.
Well done.
Thank you. A good researcher is supposed to keep their biases in check and their opinions in check, and only extract from the data the information that you've gained from the women who I interviewed, and then write about that. So I'm a distant party for this information. So what I did is presented the stories and information from women in an academic way. That's a PhD. So when people are like, how dare you talk about free birth? You haven't free birthed yourself. I always tell them, I haven't talked about free birth. I did not add my opinion to my PhD. The information in my PhD is all from women who free birthed or who
Mm.
birthed outside the system. So when I talk about free birth, I'm talking about their stories. And so for people who don't think I'm allowed to talk about free birth, I'm only sharing the women's stories from the research that I did.
Mm.
And so, I mean, no one hangs around for that part of the conversation. They just drop insult bombs and then run off and don't listen to the next part of the sentence. But uh, the flip side of it is like, imagine saying to people, "Oh, well, you've never been to war, so you can't talk about war." Or, "Hey, you've never like I have not done most things in the world. Like but I'm allowed to talk about climate change and I'm allowed to talk about all this other stuff that I've really not kind of intimately involved in." But it's so yeah, it's an interesting argument. Sorry, I just had to unleash there about that whole like you can't talk
No,
about free birth.
but it's also fair because, like, I think as someone who has free birthed,
Yeah.
I, when I'm making those decisions, and I've had to very, like, with a lot of intent, like, make that decision every time. It's not just being flippant. And every single time I've been like, I don't know, might end in a C-section. Who knows? Like, I try and like lay down my own biases and dogma because it's still birth. I I want information from lots of different areas. Like I personally feel that I can't make an informed decision unless I've listened to information from lots of different professionals, whether I agree with them or not. I mean, I listened to Ranscog and that was really hard. That was a very hard thing to do, but it was good because I listened to it and I'm like, okay, I know that information. I feel nauseous because I don't agree with any of it, but I can like honestly say that at least I've listened to it. It doesn't sing true for me. Move along. But I just feel like there was maybe a lot of decisions being made without that level of investment in research and understanding. And that's kind of what I felt when I was listening to some of these stories in The Guardian, where these women were making decisions based on what they heard from two women and only positive outcome birth stories. And that's not an informed decision. That's an influenced decision. So I just, yeah, and I just felt like maybe we need to have this conversation, and I'm going to bring lots of people on from all walks of life, maybe not all walks of life, still people that I appreciate, but
Yeah.
but who can weigh in and help with the decision-making process. On that, how do you free birth safely and wisely?
Right. Okay. So first up, as I am a midwife, I would not personally encourage women to plan a free birth. I have seen physiological birth unfold. I've seen birth unfold for both women who have very few complications to very many complications. I know my own clinical work is very hands off, very low intervention. And even in that scenario, I've watched things unfold that, required medical care. I will also say that most of the time, the vast majority of the time, birth goes well. But a core component of physiological birth, of normal birth, is that there is always a risk that something is going to go wrong. Our bodies are not perfect. Part of the ideology that says if only you just give your body everything it needs, if you're well nourished, if your mindset is 100% spot on, if you've exercised, if you've this and that, if only I could bring my body to a point of peak perfection, then that will translate into a good outcome from my birth. It's not true. You could do everything within your power to make sure everything goes well. And while I do think that will increase your chances of things going perfectly well, you can never fully step out of the possibility of risk for birth. And society has known that forever. Since the dawn of time, since we've started having babies, this is an opportunity for our bodies not to function well. And that if you fully understand normal birth and physiology, you understand that there's a percentage of time where physiology doesn't work and you need help. And that's the place of maternity care provision. So, how do you free birth safely? I mean, you have to make the decision to free birth of your own free will without being influenced by the stories and information of other people. To choose free birth is to take absolute 100% total radical responsibility over everything. A decision to free birth is a decision to step out of mainstream maternity care and take full responsibility over that. And that means fully understanding how your body works, how it's supposed to work, what it would look like if it didn't work. And then it's your responsibility to know, what would I do in an emergency? So if you want to safely free birth, and again, we can't, even the idea of how safe is free birth has never been researched. We don't have any information about the statistical chances of things going wrong or right in a free birth. We don't know how many babies would die in a free birth, how many would survive, how many would be healthy, how many would have long-term issues. We have zero information. So anybody who says free birth is safe or free birth is dangerous, there's zero external evidence to support either of those statements. So you can't make a decision if you assume that it's safe or you assume that it's dangerous. That's your own assumptions. There's no evidence, external evidence that can prove either of those things. So you need to know that this is an unresearched area. We have zero information. We know why women choose, but we don't know the outcomes. So you need to go, well, how do I feel about that? Do I feel comfortable about this kind of unsubstantiated way of birthing? Historically, midwives have existed before medicine existed. Communities have always sought out a wise woman who comes to all the births in the community, who has an apprentice that they're teaching, who watches hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of births before given any responsibility. And so this is how it was done with women, with wise women, with medicine women, with apprentices through experience. This is how the knowledge was passed on. So you've got to know that when you're choosing a free birth, you're choosing a relatively new way in human history to give birth. It's unusual. In the same way as hospital birth has been unusual throughout history, giving birth on your own and taking on the full responsibility of the clinical decision making, of the problem solving, of all of these things, this is a brand new way of giving birth. It's a recent historical event. There are some, if you read some work by Robbie Davis Floyd, she writes a lot about other historical birthing ways. There are some very small and obscure kind of communities, remote communities, where they've reported that women go off on their own and give birth and then come back with a baby. But they are the rarity. And obviously there's some birth cultures that have developed in smaller, remote places. But historically, overall, midwives or wise women, the experienced women, have been given the responsibility of understanding when physiology is no longer functioning and what to do.
Can I tell you what I've been putting in my morning beverage every single day lately? Because I'm obsessed. I've been a Superfeast devotee for years now. Their range of medicinal mushrooms and tonic herbs is extraordinary, and I come back to different ones depending on what my body needs. Right now, my absolute go-to is tremella. Known as the beauty mushroom, it's been used for thousands of years as a deep hydration tonic. I stir it into my morning drink every day, and my skin has genuinely never been more plump and hydrated. Family-owned, Australian, pure extracts and nothing added. And they only sell what they take themselves. For me, that kind of integrity means everything. Return to Wisdom listeners get 10% off with my code Return to Wisdom at superfeast.com. That's superfeast.com. And the links will be in the show notes.
So, to come back to your question, how do you plan a safe free birth? You need to know, we don't know if it's safe or dangerous before you get started. You have to take all of the responsibility to understand if things are normal and abnormal, and make a plan for what you're going to do if they're abnormal. And do you have the capacity to do that in labor? Because another thing that we know about physiology is your capacity to make complex decisions, to have conversations, to give yourself medical care is diminished, because the way that your brain works has to change in order to give birth. In order for your body to physiologically function, you need to let go of that thinking part of your brain, the overthinking part of your brain, the part of your brain that you might need to engage to go, hey, is that too much blood that I'm losing? I don't know, because I'm actually right now hormonally wired to be giving birth, not to be making complex clinical decisions. So I actually feel sorry for women who are free birthing, who get robbed of the opportunity of a worry-free birth because they have to be on their guard and they're responsible for clinical decision making. And I think, wow, imagine how much better your birth could be if you could just give birth and completely surrender to what your body's doing, and not have to think about if something is abnormal or if something is going wrong, because you have entrusted an external person whose only job is to do that. My only job at a birth is to go, is everything still normal? Do I need to do anything? And if everything's still normal, then I go, no, I don't have to do anything. But my job is to be hyper vigilant to all of that, or to the whole clinical scenario without interrupting the woman. That's my job. And so if you're not ready to do that, if you think, actually, I don't want to have to worry about that, then you need to defer that responsibility to a qualified healthcare provider. And that's a midwife. And if you're having a home birth, you'd have a home birth midwife, not a birth worker. They're not the clinical decision makers. They've got they've got other extraordinary roles that they can fill, but it's not midwifery and it's not clinical. Or obviously the place where you go to get constant medical care and potentially too much medical care is in a hospital. So firstly, if you want a free birth, you've got to know that's the responsibility you're taking on. If you don't want to take on that responsibility, you have to hire somebody, or you have to completely step into that role. And that means heavily researching, heavily planning, preparing the people around you. And what we don't talk about is the burden that is placed on the other people in the birth space, possibly the partner, who may or may not be prepared or willing to be the rescuer in a situation of danger, because your capacity is suddenly gone. So imagine though, you've prepared, you've done all this preparation, you've got all this knowledge, you've got all these skills, you can resus a baby, you've got medicines to stop bleeding, you know what to do if the baby's breech or shoulder dystocia, and all of a sudden you're not capable of doing that, and your partner is left potentially not as prepared as you were to step in as in that responsibility. So, if you're planning a free birth, you have to have a safe one, in inverted commas. I don't know if it's safe. I can't tell you if it's safe or dangerous because no research, no information about that. Then you've got to be responsible for all planning for all possible scenarios. So if you don't even know how much is too much blood, okay, you got to go find that out. What do you do if the head comes out and in the next contraction the shoulders don't? Is that a problem? If you don't know the answer to that, you're not ready to free birth. And what happens if you see the baby's bum before the head? You can't just hope, because at least 30% of breech babies need a hand to get out. So there's a 1 in 3 chance that you have to do something. The problem here with breech birth is the most dangerous thing for a breech baby is an untrained and unprepared healthcare provider, because you can really stuff up a breech birth with ignorance. And so if all of a sudden you think, well, the baby's breech, hang on, it's stuck, and you start pulling, you're in more danger than you were before putting the hands on the baby. So if you don't have all of that knowledge, you've put yourself in a more dangerous scenario than if there was a care provider whose only job it is to be clinically responsible.
Yeah.
And that's the information that's lost. Is I think people get into their head that if only they do everything right, their birth will go well, and there's a really high chance that that will happen.
Mm.
But do you know what to do if it doesn't? And what are the signs that things aren't going well? And and where will you go? And who's responsible for making that decision?
Yeah.
Uh yeah. There's so much more you could talk about, but
No, I think, and I actually really appreciate you bringing up the partner, the dad's role in that space, or if you invite your mum into your free birth or whoever around you. Because, I mean, one of the things, and it's a question that I've received quite a bit from women, is like, I want a free birth or I want a home birth. How do I get my husband on board? And it's like, well, that's a big conversation that you need to have. And I know that there's a lot of talk about, well, no, you're the woman, you should decide. He should just be supporting you. You have to push baby out. But, and that's all well and truly good to say, but I think so many men are not comfortable with it because of that responsibility falling on them. And they're like, I don't even have a vagina. Like, what? Like, I
so,
just,
like, how dare we say to the person we love who we're having a baby with, hey, you are now responsible. I'm giving you the
mm,
responsibility of a doula, birth worker, or midwife. I'm not sure what I'm going to need, but I'm making this decision, and that the flip side of that is you have to be completely prepared as well.
yeah.
And I think that's unfair. I
Mm,
think, yeah, if your partner's on board and they're like, I am willing to take that role on,
mm.
absolutely, sure, go for it. But if they're uncertain and they're saying, I don't know anything about birth, I don't know how to help you, and you're like, well, figure it out. It's not.
It's not conducive to a good start in your baby's life. But like also
And then who do you, sorry, I interrupted you, but
no.
if you take it all the way and something doesn't go right, all of a sudden you've introduced this huge thing into your relationship of like the woman's thinking, why didn't you do something? And he's thinking, why was I in this position in the first place? I didn't know what to do. And there's all of this guilt and issue. Like, yeah, sorry. Yeah, it goes the whole way. If you take it
Mm,
to the best case scenario, it could be amazing. But if it goes to the worst case scenario and they weren't truly fully on board, there's bigger problems now.
yeah. 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 I think too, maybe like the weight of responsibility is good for everyone to acknowledge when it comes to making these decisions, because like while there are people who want the weight of those responsibilities entirely. Like for me personally, if I was in a hospital and I had abjugated my care to a care provider and something went wrong, I would feel responsible entirely. So for me, when I'm making those decisions, I have to take that into account too. I'm like, well, I should have been more prepared. I should have known. I should have taken more responsibility in that. But if you're not that way inclined to think and you feel like, no, I gave you that responsibility, you should have done this, then I don't know where I'm going with that.
Mhm. No, but I think it's what you've touched on is the topic of responsibility, and I think that's the big issue.
Yeah, yeah,
Is that in hospitals, women are too often have their autonomy and responsibility removed from them, that they feel like they have to really cling to it, like fight to hold on to it. And that's partly the reason that some women free birth is like, I don't want to fight for my autonomy. I want to be fully responsible. I don't want to have to wrestle with people about that. But it's kind of the extreme decision making about that.
yeah. But I think also taking on board the weight of what that actually means.
Yes.
that's where I was going with it. So
Wait, yeah.
yeah. So to come at it from the standpoint of, no, you have to just be on board with what I'm doing, like bringing it back to a couple making this decision, and then say you pass out in your birth, which there are stories of that, then all of a sudden he's now responsible for your life and the baby's life and has zero midwifery skills. So yeah, that's, I think, I have heard so many people say that he should just be on board with whatever you say. To bring that back and put a little dose of reality into it, it's more complicated and nuanced than my body, my birth, my baby, my way. Then yeah, and I think we've over talked about that. So
Wow. It's okay. We had to go there. We went there.
yeah. So if we weren't cancelled before, we are now.
Okay. We're just talking to ourselves at this point. Everyone's checked out.
Dig that hole. Okay, so say someone has fallen into free birth and they're like, this looks like an amazing option. I have heard so many of my friends' stories about even like home births where they feel like they were mistreated, or hospital scenarios where the woman was mistreated and I want a physiological birth, and there is this influencer and that influencer, they're saying, you know, you wouldn't go to McDonald's for a filet mignon. Why would you go to a medical provider to have a physiological birth? Saw that this morning. So I like, you know, when people are making those kind of comparisons and you're like, okay, free birth is my only option. What are other options that women can make if they're like listening to this, they're kind of like, oh, so on with free birth. Now I feel like I have my doubts. And what are my other options for a physiological birth?
So physiological birth, the further away you get from hospital, so if you think about the locations, you've got private hospital, public hospital, internal birth center, external birth center, and then the option of home birth and free birth. The further away you get on that spectrum from the private hospital, so increases your chances of a physiological birth. So barring free birth, say you've decided that no, don't want a free birth, want a physiological birth, but don't want a free birth. The most likely chance that your baby's going to come out of your vagina under your own power with limited interventions is if you have a home birth, a private home birth midwife and you have a home birth. Now, here in Australia, it depends on where you're listening. There's lots of different ways that you can home birth. Here in Australia, there are around 20 or 21 publicly funded home birth programs, but your chances of a physiological birth is still going to be less under one of those programs because there's this heavy hospital sort of oversight on those midwives. And so they can't work to their full scope. They have to work to hospital policy. So firstly, just to get on those programs is really tricky. And then to stay on is the next hurdle. And then there's a more of an opportunity that you'll have to transfer to hospital under a publicly funded home birth model, but still a great option in terms of aligning with your midwife, the midwife who if they're in a home birth program, they're probably invested in helping you have a physiological birth and they are confident with the skills that are required to do that. Because there is a skill set involved for midwives who support physiological birth that is different to midwives who have only seen birth in a hospital. And there's some midwives who get really upset when I say things like that because they're like, well, we want to support physiology, but we're in a hospital and hospital midwives are great too. Not saying you're not great. All I'm saying is that when you get to watch physiological birth unfold without interventions, you learn something different than when you watch it unfold with things like 4-hourly vaginal exams or CTG monitoring or in an unfamiliar environment. It's just really different and you can't see that until you get to witness both. So while I nothing against hospital midwives, in fact, I have just so much reverence for them because I couldn't do that. I couldn't do hospital birth. Just my like nervous system could not cope with that. And so I'm in awe that midwives are still working for women in hospitals. And I just think that's amazing. So, but if you want a physiological birth, that you've got more of a chance if you've got midwifery care. So let's say you don't have the option of a private midwife, you don't have the option of a home birth program, publicly funded home birth program. The next thing you want to do is have a chat to your local birth services about possibly external birth centres. There are some private birth centres, but public birth centres, and midwifery group practice. So, midwifery models of care in the hospital, which means you'd have a single or a team of midwives who's offering you your care through pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And these these scenarios, midwife-led kind of care, is your most likely chance of physiological birth. The other thing you can do if you want a physiological birth is to acknowledge that our bodies do function optimally when they are in an optimal condition. So if you're already thinking, gosh, I do have some health issues, or maybe I don't eat that great, and maybe I don't move enough, there's some little things that you can do to enhance the function of your body that are also going to enhance how your body will function in labor and birth. And things like staying moving and active, hydrated, having support with you, all these little things that you could do, that
Mm.
this is all the stuff I talk about on the Great Birth Rebellion podcast too. A lot of the episodes are centered around what can you do to contribute to the possibility of a good chance of you having a physiological birth without intervention. There's lots we can do. Then there's a whole bunch of stuff we have no control over, but you can't worry about that stuff. That stuff that you can't have control over, that's a responsibility of your care providers to try and navigate and identify
Mm.
and offer you options as to, okay, in this scenario, which none of us anticipated, but we're now observing, you need to make some decisions that you didn't really want to make, that weren't part of your plan. What do you want to do? So, yeah, does that answer your question about what can you do if you want a physiological birth? But
Yes.
you're inching away from free birth. Yeah,
Can I also add to that? And I'm pretty sure that studies show this, that having a doula in
absolutely.
those scenarios where you also have medical care providers
Mhm.
will increase your chance of a physiological birth.
Absolutely. And where the research is on this is, yes, doulas. They've also done research on what they've called one-to-one care,
Mhm.
where it actually doesn't matter who the other person is. It could be an incredible friend, your mum who you love, your partner who's really capable. They've done research on pairing student midwives or student nurses with labouring women as the one-to-one care provider,
Mm.
and found very similar outcomes
Mhm.
to the benefits of doulas. So yes, absolutely, these doulas are like professional support people. They're elite support people, right? So if you're looking around at your care team and you're thinking, there is no one here who's got their shit together enough to be able to support me in labor and birth when things get wild, when I need extra support. And so I'm going to hire this person whose job it is to help me transition through this thing, do this big thing. So yes, doulas, it's your support team is integral. And we also know that the longer you spend in hospital, the increase every hour extra you spend in hospital, then you get more interventions. It's just how hospitals work.
Mm.
So the less time you can spend in a hospital for your birth, the less chance you'll have interventions, and therefore the more chance you'll have a physiological birth. So being prepared with your partner or support people or doula to stay at home as long as you can in labor, and just go to hospital or call your midwife at the time where you think, well, maybe it's time for the baby to come out, maybe we're getting close to the end. That's quite an ideal situation if you're thinking about, how do I have a physiological birth?
Is it so? Just to reiterate, even in a home birth scenario, try and call your midwife like
Yeah,
towards
it's a
the
little
end.
bit different. It's a
Yeah.
little
Okay.
bit different, isn't it, at home? Because, yeah, the midwife will come with a new energy.
Yeah.
And if it goes both ways, because in a home birth scenario, the woman has hired me specifically. The woman's chosen personally the midwife she wants to have. They have a relationship. Hopefully, it's a good one. This is not always the case. I'm aware that there's not always an abundance of midwives, and sometimes women have to choose a midwife that's just available, not necessarily one that they really, really, really wanted. But if the relationship is good and you trust your midwife, it's possible actually that your labor will go better when they're there, because you can let go of some fears and concerns and things that are on your mind, where you just think, and I've seen it. I've walked through the door sometimes and the women have gone, "Oh, you're here." And you can just see that they were kind of, there was a piece missing for them to keep laboring confidently because you weren't there, because part of their comfort was this midwife that they'd chosen. And I think that that is a real, we are relational, people are designed to be in community and in relationship, and midwives have always been a part of that. There's a research paper that I had a look at in one of the podcast episodes about the role of Indigenous midwives in the community, and they were like, they were the top of the peak. If you were gonna think of community leadership and hierarchy, the midwives, like, they were up there as the peak sort of leaders and elders in the community. And so then when they walk somebody like that would walk through the door, it's somebody that you've chosen, that you respect, that in the community, it's like, okay, I got everything I need. So it's a bit different in home birth, I think, that the midwife is not necessarily coming with intervention. And some people will say a midwife is an intervention. And I object to that as well, actually. I think midwives can be an intervention and can provide interventions. But in a scenario where you've chosen your care team and you know that they're all going to be there,
Mm.
the midwife is no more an intervention than the partner, than the doula, than the other children in the room, than the dog who walks past in the space. Like, we're all there together to support you to have your baby. And the language of the midwife is an intervention kind of positions midwives outside of normal birth, outside of physiological birth, as like an imposer on
Mm.
birth. But I don't think historically midwives have been an imposition on women in birth.
Mm.
But I think as they're becoming more integrated into a medicalized system, they become part of a global imposition on physiological birth. But that can be teased and separated out in the scenario of home birth, where the woman has chosen that midwife and where they have a relationship.
Yeah, and I kind of like when I listen to you speak about that, I do also think about like the role that elders played within a community, and how right now everyone's starving for elders and wants to bring that back, and like midwifery is like another arm of that as well. Yeah, no, and so anyway, I think it's interesting to ponder on that we've we kind of shunned all the elders for technology and for new innovations.
Individualism. Well, society's moved from community focus to being individually focused
Mm,
and thinking that we have everything within ourselves to provide everything that we possibly need. But that's never been the case.
yeah,
Humans have always relied on each other to provide for each other.
yeah.
So to think that within you as one single person, you have everything you and your family could possibly need, I think there's a element of ignorance there, and uh, and an influence of modern society, because
Mm,
traditional societies would never have thought, I can survive on my own. I've got everything I need. We all always in community. Birth was always a social event.
mm,
So that's why when I think of free birth and I say, like, this is a newer birth phenomenon, I think it's come in with the individualization of people within society and this kind of isolation of people within society. And free birth is part of that.
yeah. And some of the language used around it was very isolating too. when you hear about, again, like shunning your partner because they don't agree with your choices, or your family because they don't agree with your choices. So no, I think that's something to take into consideration as well. It's all very interesting. Okay, so I want to wrap up our free birth chat a little bit, because I did a question box, because I'm doing a little birth series that is very heavily free birth related. However, I did ask people for questions, and they came at me with just regular questions.
Sure.
Not free birth related at all. And I'm like, I'm getting Melanie on, so I feel like that's perfect person to ask these questions too. So the first one was, C-sections being the safest way to birth. Can we debunk that?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I am literally in the middle of writing a whole episode on this, because it erupted on social media recently, where people were like, cesareans are safer than vaginal birth. Okay. It's a lot. And again, when I'm writing this, I don't even know if I could get my discussion into an hour and a half. So let me see if I can give you like a 1 minute. There is no way on earth that cesareans are safer than vaginal birth for women most of the time. But in some scenarios, they are better. Now, I'll say that. It doesn't matter if you're having an elective cesarean, an emergency cesarean, an unplanned or a planned one. There are always risks to a cesarean section. However, sometimes those risks are worth taking, because you're going to get a better outcome for you and your baby if you accept those risks. So, for example, if you have grade 4 placenta previa, where your placenta is lying over your cervix, once you go into labor and you start dilating, the placenta is going to shear away from the cervix. The blood flow to your baby is going to be interrupted. And in almost 100% of circumstances, your baby will die before it's born in a placenta previa. However, and so a cesarean section is absolutely less risky and way better for your baby. However, it's still a risky procedure for you, but you're willing to take that risk because it's the only way you're going to have a live baby in that scenario. So, in that scenario, a cesarean is way better, but it's not less risky. But it's a better scenario than the other opportunity. So when people ask me, is cesarean safer than vaginal birth? It's not safer. You are, from a maternal perspective, most of the time you're going to be safer having a vaginal birth. But you've also got to consider about the outcomes for your baby. So there's two people in this scenario to consider what's better and worse. So there's risks and benefits of vaginal birth, and there's risks and benefits of cesarean section. And so you've got to assess your scenario and choose which risks you're willing to take. And so the reasons will be different for everybody. And, some women who've had a previous 4th degree tear and maybe didn't heal so well, maybe for them, they're considering, cesarean section won't be better for their baby. Vaginal birth is still better for their baby. But for them, in that scenario where their pelvic floor hasn't properly healed and they're concerned about the impact on their pelvic floor of another vaginal birth, maybe for them, cesarean section's better, but again, not less risky. So we can't, there's no way to say, is cesarean safer than vaginal birth? If we're thinking globally, like just overarching, no, it's not safer, but sometimes it's better. Mm.
So if we see an influencer online who has elected to have a C-section and is spouting that it is safer, you can just immediately use your brain and what you have learned here and say, no, that is incorrect.
And maybe it was safer for her or her baby in their scenario, but you've got to make these decisions individually. Like if I'm sitting here spouting, I think from research and a whole lot of things, that most women would be safer having a home birth. But it's not necessarily better for all of them to do that if they don't want to do it, if that doesn't fit how they feel safe and all these kinds of things. You can't take information that somebody's given you and use that to make an isolated decision. There's so many elements that go into making wise decisions for you individually. Information and opinion is just one tiny little section.
Okay. Is it possible to have a VBAC after multiple C-sections?
Yes, it's possible. In fact, there's research on this. I've seen research for up to three previous cesarean sections, and the risks don't increase so exponentially. In fact, with the research on three previous cesarean sections, the conclusions that the researchers came to was that every woman, regardless of how many previous cesarean sections, should be offered the opportunity to have a vaginal birth. However, I do think that should be done in hospital because the more cesareans you have, depending on the reasons for those cesarean sections, can determine the chances of there being of a spontaneous vaginal birth happening.
Mhm. So
So for me as a home birth midwife, VBACs are kind of like almost you don't even see them as a risk factor anymore. But that's just because I'm experienced and I'm confident that I can detect certain things.
Mhm.
I have historically attended home birth for two previous cesarean sections. Again, that's individually selected scenarios. And I've had colleagues who have assisted women in hospital with third and fourth previous cesareans to have vaginal births. And it's absolutely physiologically possible. And I think women should be offered the opportunity, ideally in hospital with supportive care providers who aren't frightened. Yeah.
I like that. Now we just need to find those people.
It's a unicorn situation, but that's what the research, kind of offers.
Is gestational age an actual concern or risk factor?
Yes, it is. So we do know that the chances of stillbirth and poorer outcomes start to increase almost I don't want to say like the seesaw tips around 41 weeks in terms of like benefit to the baby to staying in to coming out. Uh what we know is that the stillbirth rate starts to increase exponentially from about 41 weeks gestation. What we also know is that there's two ways to mitigate the risks of that. One is elective induction, and baby comes out, and obviously, because you're not pregnant anymore, you eliminate the risk of stillbirth. Or, and this is the information I choose to use in my practice, extra monitoring and extra care in the 41st and 42nd week has the equal outcome to induction of labor. So if you are beyond 41 weeks and you decide you don't want to have an induction for being post dates, I
Mhm.
hate the word, but post dates, I'm using inverted commas. Uh, all you need to do is say, look, I don't want to be induced. However, I do acknowledge that there is an increased risk. The longer you're pregnant, there's an increased risk of something happening owing to the fact that you're pregnant still. And there's always a possibility of complications. I would like extra monitoring. So for me, my clients would have an ultrasound at 41 weeks and 5 days. Then we'd have an appointment with the local hospital at 42 weeks to kind of make a plan for ongoing monitoring, which might involve additional ultrasounds, maybe CTGs, although they're not evidence based. That's kind of the best that the hospital's got for us. And so we talk to the women about you don't necessarily have to be induced, but you need to acknowledge that it's a time for more maternity care. And the research has shown that if that is offered, that mitigates the increased risk of stillbirth as well. So
Mhm.
it's not kind of no induction and then I'll see you in a week. It's okay, I'll have no induction and we'll just check in a bit more to make sure everything's still all good. And there's only been a few circumstances where I've had clients who've, had an ultrasound at 41 weeks and 5 days and then gone for another one at 42 and there's been a dramatic difference and you're like, whoa, all of a sudden there's no amniotic fluid and the baby's biophysical profile score's gone way down and the Doppler blood flows to the placenta are clearly altered from 2 days ago. You're like, great. This is why we do extra care. to identify the small number of babies who maybe can't cope with going past 42 weeks.
Mhm.
And those are the ones that you would say to the woman, look, what do you want to do? It appears as though your baby's not thriving anymore, it being in. This would be a good reason to intervene, whereas you wouldn't intervene if those ultrasounds all look amazing still and they're over 42 weeks. You're like, well, hang on, you're probably going to be fine. The whole reason for the extra monitoring is identifying the women whose babies might not be fine with going to a later gestation.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask, what's the latest gestation you've supported a woman in, or are you not allowed to say?
Yeah. 43 weeks and 1 day.
Okay.
And she'd also had 2 previous cesarean sections.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So, for her, she gestated really long labors and not a lot of progress in labor for her 2 previous births. And as it turned out, the same thing happened with the third, but she just had to find out where the limit was.
Yeah, okay.
And so she took it all the way, 43 and 1, labored for days and days and days. Similar story to the first 2, not a lot of progress, and kind of came to her own conclusion of, I think I need another cesarean.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I reckon that's not a bad conclusion to have come to. She's like, I just needed to know if
Yeah.
what was going to happen. And so, heaps happier with that birth than the 2 previous where she didn't really know if her body could have done it or not.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, that's the latest. That's the latest. 43 and 1.
Yeah, cool.
Mm.
That's it. That's it.
Woo!
We're a wrap. Amazing.
That wasn't too long, was it?
No. Thank you so much, Melanie, for coming on. I would love to have you back if you
Oh yeah, I'm always happy to have a chat about things. I've got a
Oh,
lot to say.
look, don't we all? This is why we have podcasts.
I know, so we can just say it.
I can say it. But no, I really, really appreciate your perspective and knowledge and wisdom and everything that you bring to the table here, and also on your own podcast. Again, I've zero inclination to have any more babies, but I still love birth. I still love
Oh,
listening
yay.
about it and learning and taking on information that I can then share with the people around me. So, and I always just end up sending them to you anyway. So,
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it.
but yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on and tackling this subject with me, because it's getting harder and harder to find people who will, and which I think maybe creates more danger and more dysregulation in that field. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it's good. It's good.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you again. All right, everyone. And do you want to really quickly share anything, upcoming events or programs that you're offering? And
Upcoming events. I mean, the most exciting thing, and I'm not sure how many midwives or birth workers or doulas or even healthcare providers are listening, everyone is welcome. But every year we have the convergence of rebellious midwives, not just for midwives, but it's a beautiful big conference, and we can actually all come together face to face. And we're having that in Melbourne this year. So melaniethemidwife.com is where to find all that information. I do have lots of little mini kind of bites of information and courses. It's a guide to giving birth without pain medication I have. It's a nice little sweet little course that I love. And I released that about 20 weeks ago, and about 1,300 women have bought it and love it. So, and I keep getting all this feedback going, oh my gosh, it's insanely good. And I was like, wow, I thought it was pretty good, but they're like loving it. Uh, yeah, and I am in the process, and hopefully, maybe if people are listening to the back catalog, it'll be out. But I'm writing a book called Guide to a Great Pregnancy, and there'll be a follow-on Guide to a Great Birth. So have a look, see if that's out by the time you're listening to the episode. I'm thinking like November 2026 will be the book.
I like that.
So we'll see. Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, and obviously the Great Birth Rebellion podcast is happening, and yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Melanie. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, for joining today. This is the Birth Series from Return to Wisdom. I'm going straight to the source, the women who free birth, the professionals who study real risk, to ask the question, what if free birth, done with eyes open, isn't the danger we've been told it is? I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If this has sparked something for you, I would really appreciate it if you would like, share, review. This is how we get the word out. The birth world, especially the natural and free birth world, has gone quiet, and these are the voices that need to be raised in this moment. I can't wait to explore this with you. See you next week.